It all starts when portals appear out of nowhere, and the world is thrown into chaos as monsters pour out of them. But to save everyone, hunters emerged, awakening their power through a mysterious system. By conquering the portals, they grew stronger, and the 7 most powerful among them created noble families, until one guy became the first 9-star hunter without the help of a constellation. Because of this, the 7 families and the constellations saw this individual as a major threat to the established order. So they decided to act, and that's why the eastern capital is now being consumed by flames. All this destruction has a single goal: to take out the 9-star hunter. At this moment, one of the 7 noble families, the Romanov family, decides to show its claws. In the midst of the chaos, our hero holds a broken pocket watch that somehow still works. He looks shocked by what's happening and can barely believe the current situation. Completely wounded, the hunter falls to his knees, clutching the object tightly. Then, with a look full of hatred, he curses a man named Dmitri for all of this. High above, a cloaked figure watches him from on high, as if he's the great victor. This is Dmitri, a 9-star hunter and the incarnation of Odin, who mocks our hero. The protagonist then asks the reason behind this whole chase against him. He asks it's because he has no protection or because he refused to be their servant, and Dmitri confirms both. The old man explains that the constellations want him gone because everyone needs them to be strong. Our hero, a necromancer named Ryuga, understands they see him as a major threat. He thinks their reasoning is complete nonsense and gets pretty irritated by it. But Dmitri says that victory is decided by the power of the constellations, not by individual strength. Dmitri says that by choosing a profane power against life, our hero is abandoned by the stars. But the hunter stands up, saying the old man only talks tough because he hides behind Odin's power. With a dark aura surrounding him, he finally prepares to show the reason for his silence. Suddenly, various bones and skeletons begin to emerge from the ground, cloaked in a bluish energy. Then a wave of dark energy spreads across the area, which was devastated by the previous battle. The protagonist uses his secret technique, the Field of the Fallen, to raise the ones who were defeated. With this, an army of skeletons with glowing red eyes appears behind the Necromancer. Even though he's surprised, Dmitri decides to use his strongest magic to erase even the soul of the immortal king. The old man then concentrates a large amount of golden energy at his fingertips. Ryuga recognizes the attack as the Eye of Odin and knows his Field of the Fallen won't be able to withstand it. Without hesitation, his enemy unleashes his transcendent magic called Lord of Vermilion. A massive, brilliant sphere of energy forms in the sky, ready to destroy everything. In an instant, the attack is fired like a huge red beam toward our hero. Seeing his end, the Necromancer smiles and says that since he's going down anyway, he might as well try something. Dmitri is completely shocked and speechless to see that Ryuga is laughing at the situation. Then the protagonist raises the pocket watch he's been holding tightly this whole time. The artifact begins to glow and absorbs Dmitri's power, fulfilling the activation requirement. With its hands spinning backward, the watch announces that it's returning to the player's past. A golden light explodes as time begins to rewind, and the item's requirements are explained. Without the power of a constellation, our hero used his enemy's strength to activate the watch. The watch's energy hits the old man head-on, who doesn't understand the situation at all. In desperation, the old man yells, asking what the immortal king just did to him. Our hero explains that he'll be borrowing the power of Odin that his enemy is so proud of. With a smile on his face, he promises that next time, he will take down all 7 noble families. At that moment, the watch's hand starts spinning wildly backward, reversing time. Then a very bright red light begins to swallow everything and everyone around the Necromancer. Suddenly, the scene changes, and now we're looking at the ceiling of a very modern room. The protagonist wakes up in bed, gasping for air, and now he looks much younger than before. Totally confused, the young man places a hand on his chest, trying to understand what just happened. His gaze sweeps across the place to try and recognize the environment where he woke up. The young man then realizes he's in the bedroom of the old house where he lived years ago. Sitting on the bed, the boy looks at the watch and wonders if his plan actually worked. With a look of pure rage, he thinks of Dmitri and vows to make that old man pay. The item is the pocket watch of Kronos, an ancient relic that can interfere with time. With a confident smile, the young man realizes his risky bet paid off in the end. A system window pops up, and he understands he's returned to the day it all began, 10 years ago. His status screen shows he's level 1 and has the innate trait of clear mind. The system offers 3 basic classes for him to choose from: martial artist, mage, or cleric. He remembers that in his past life, he ended up choosing the path of magic without much thought. But this time, the young man won't rush and will become much stronger to survive until the end. With a plan in mind, he'll use all his knowledge from his past life to get stronger. With that in mind, the young man heads to a large hunter market to buy a special item. Arriving there, a friendly saleswoman greets him with a smile, ready to help. But before she can finish speaking, our hero interrupts her and asks for a very specific ring. The woman is completely confused and caught off guard by the mysterious customer's sudden request. She then warns him that the ring is cursed, but he doesn't care and asks for the item's price. Despite the saleswoman's warnings, the young man doesn't think twice before leaving the store with the item. The store is not responsible for any loss or damage, and the woman asks if he still wants to buy it. He knows she's worried, since no one would pay $2 million for such a bad ring. The item's description says it has a mental curse that swallows anyone who dares to equip it. But our hero knows a secret no one else does, so he puts on the ring without fear. It turns out that for those who can resist the curse, the ring grants the power of a necromancer. With a wicked smile and glowing eyes, he feels the new power flowing through his entire body. Suddenly, the scenery changes, and the young man finds himself in a dark and completely distorted place. Staring into nothingness, he thinks about his own personal curse that has always haunted him. The image of Dmitri appears in his mind, and the protagonist knows that his curse is that old man. The voice of his old enemy echoes, calling him a monster who manipulates the decaying flesh of the fallen. The old man then questions if he truly believes he can win without any protection. The image of the 9-star hunter tries to grab him with its spectral, glowing hands. He warns that even by returning to the past, the outcome of the fight between them won't change. The old man's image attacks our hero with a giant golden punch to crush him for good, but a system window informs him that all mental interference has been completely blocked. With his clear mind skill activated, he gains absolute resistance, and the attack dissipates. The ring's necromancer power finally awakens, and the secret is simply to resist the curse. With that, the curse's illusion shatters, and the system congratulates him for passing the ring's test. Shrouded in a dark aura, he reaffirms his choice to become a necromancer once again. With this, the system confirms he has passed the test, and the ring evolves into an epic rarity item. Satisfied with the result, he holds the ring, which now shines with an intense purple light. Then, the class selection screen reappears, and now the necromancer option is available. Upon confirming his choice, a floating skull appears, and his mana is converted into spiritual power. As a bonus, he gets the Guide of the Fallen, which reduces the power cost for his summons. With a confident smile, the young man feels he has started his new journey on the right foot. But upon checking his status screen, he notices that for now, he only has 2 skills. He can raise the Fallen and control bones, but since his rank is low, he can't use everything. The young man understands that even with all the knowledge from his past life, he can't break the rules. He knows he can follow the system up to the 7-star rank, but the 9th level is different. Becoming a necromancer early is a good start, but he knows it's not enough for his goal. With a determined look, he realizes that to defeat Dmitri, he's going to need a constellation. With this in mind, our hero takes a plane and travels to a set of distant islands in Greece. His destination is a tourist spot known as the Temple of Kronos, which is in ruins. In this place, there are ancient constellations that lost their light after being defeated by Zeus. The Titans who accepted Olympus's victory were still able to act, but the others were sealed away. Inside the ruins, the young man finds an ancient marble sarcophagus and approaches it. He then remembers that the original owner of the pocket watch was someone else, not him. With a smile on his face, he raises the item and prepares to meet the fallen constellation. Without a second thought, our hero shatters the sarcophagus with a single, powerful punch. With the watch glowing in his hand, a golden energy begins to pour out of the broken object. Suddenly, the entire ruined temple begins to disintegrate and a new scene appears. Now our hero finds himself in a majestic hall with an enormous and beautiful stained glass window. A mysterious voice asks who is there, and the young man looks to the side with a smile. Then a giant and furious ghostly figure appears, demanding to know who dares to be so insolent. Without showing a hint of fear, the protagonist faces the entity with a confident look. He then greets Kronos, the dethroned king of the Titans, showing he knows who he's talking to. The ancient constellation stares at the young human with a serious and suspicious look, wondering what's to come. The young man holds the pocket watch, which is proof of his connection to this forgotten place. With a deep voice, the Titan asks the little one if he was the one who managed to go back in time. Swinging the watch, the boy confirms that it was him, with a very smug smile on his face. Kronos acknowledges his strength but asks why he was awakened from his slumber. The young man thinks that the Titan must still have a great desire for revenge against Olympus. With that in mind, he asks the ancient constellation directly if it doesn't want revenge. Surprised by the human's audacity, the Titan leans in and asks what he just said. The young man then makes his proposal for Kronos to become his constellation in exchange for help. Furious, the Titan threatens the protagonist for thinking a mere human can take on Olympus. Calmly, our hero continues to hold the watch, as he knows he has an ace up his sleeve. He reveals that he has already reached the 9-star level and that Zeus is also on his list of enemies. In addition, the 7 great noble families are also targets for his future revenge. He continues, saying that if he destroys the family that hosts the Olympians, they will lose their influence. The Titan finds it strange that a necromancer who has already gone back in time would still seek his protection. So he claims to be incompatible with a power that defies providence, but the young man disagrees. Kronos is not only the god of time, he is also the god of the harvest, and that changes everything. It turns out his scythe represents the harvest and demise, and both share providence. Furious, the Titan tells the insolent human not to dare link his nature with demise. With the entity's rage, the entire celestial hall begins to shake violently all around. But the young man shouts that now is not the time for this kind of silly argument. He asks if Kronos plans to live for the rest of eternity without his power and his name. The young man says that if he's fine with being weaker than the Olympians, then he can just leave. But he came believing that the ancient constellation would choose revenge above all else. Anxious, the protagonist thinks that he has no other option, and if this fails, he's in big trouble. Slowly, the Titan's expression of anger transforms into a faint, confident smile. He admits that he has never forgotten his revenge and decides to test the power behind the young man's fury. The entity considers transforming the god of the harvest into something that defies providence itself. With his hand glowing, he warns that reversing his nature will cause immense agony, but if the boy can withstand all this pain, he will become its new proxy. Without warning, a very strong golden light begins to fill the entire celestial hall. Caught by surprise, the protagonist asks if the test is going to happen right now, at this moment. With an imposing voice, Kronos names him as his proxy and as his new saint. The protagonist is completely shocked to discover he has become a saint just like that. As a saint, he begins to receive a sacred power that flows through his entire body without stopping. But the dark attribute of a necromancer and the sacred one of a saint come into a major conflict. He knows that if he passes out now, he will lose his only chance to have a constellation forever. Meanwhile, the fallen titan just watches the young man struggle to endure the pain of the process. With great determination and effort, he forces himself to endure the transformation until the end. Sometime later, the scene changes and now the young man is back in Japan, walking calmly. He pulls his suitcase through the airport with a very calm and satisfied expression on his face. With a smile on his face, he seems happy to be back home after all that. Suddenly, a small version of Kronos appears and asks if the world has changed that much. The small entity floats around, commenting on how cruel and magnificent time is. The system then announces that a new star has appeared, and its name is now the Blue Giant. The protagonist complains that for someone who can't even give a blessing, the Titan talks too much. He thinks that even without power or worshippers, the new constellation seems quite happy about this. But to regain its power, they need to build a reputation for the Titan from scratch. Even so, after an eternity, the ancient god is excited to have been resurrected. Kronos then tells his new saint to spread his name around so he can become famous. With that, the young man realizes he's in a unique situation, having suddenly become a priest. His new class is the Saint of the White Knight, which has no penalties for necromancer spells. He also gains the Life Drain skill, which absorbs the life force of his targets. A saint uses sacred power as a base, while a necromancer uses spiritual power to fight. Our hero realizes that being able to use both skills at the same time is completely overpowered. Kronos boasts about making a good choice, and the young man says it was all calculated from the beginning. Now, with his initial plan complete, he starts thinking about his next step to evolve. With a smile on his face, he decides that the gate in Furojuku is a good choice for a test. The place called the Ancient Garden seems to be the perfect spot for him to test his new powers. Then the scene takes us to the middle of a big city on a very bright and sunny day. There, in the middle of nowhere, is a portal that connects to other dimensions and can be of two types. This is a fixed type called the Ancient Garden, and its entry requirement is to be 1 star. Since it's an easy portal, it's ideal for rookie hunters to enter and gain experience. Several hunters are looking for a party, and he remembers that he never had a decent team. He observes the other hunters with a serious look, focused on his own objective there. Then a group approaches and invites him to join their team since he's alone. But the protagonist politely declines the offer, continues on his way toward the portal. The group's leader is a little surprised but understands the young man's decision and leaves him be. One of them wonders if the boy will be okay alone, as he seems to be a new hunter. But the girl on the team says not to worry, since he himself refused their help. With a smile, he knows that at this level, he's fine on his own and just wants to test his new skills. Without further delay, the young man enters the portal, and the system confirms his entry into the Ancient Garden. Inside, he finds himself in a very calm and quiet forest with dense vegetation. He knows that in this type of place, silence always means something is about to jump out of the bushes. With a confident smile and glowing eyes, he prepares for his first prey in the garden. And just like that, a small, weird monster jumps from the treetops to attack him by surprise. The creature is a simple goblin with red eyes and a dagger, charging straight at him. But our hero doesn't even move and calmly waits for the creature's attack without showing any fear. The little monster lets out a high-pitched scream as it tries to stab the hunter with its small weapon. Then the young man thanks it for coming and uses his skill to convert spiritual power. With that, he activates his life drain and starts siphoning all the poor goblin's life force. The protagonist realizes that using sacred and spiritual power is quite similar in the end. Dark hands grab the creature, which screams in pain as its energy is drained relentlessly. With a greenish aura around him, he just watches the process with a very focused look. After absorbing all its life, the goblin's body falls to the ground, and the hero's base stats increase. He is shocked to see his attributes rise when he uses this skill to defeat monsters. With this, he calculates that defeating 25 goblins this way is the same as leveling up. Beside him, the small version of Kronos appears, floating to talk with its new saint. The entity asks if he liked it, and the young man confirms that this new skill is amazing. Very proud, the Titan tells the young man to praise its greatness, and he has to admit it's true. Now with a fresh body in front of him, he prepares to use his other skills. Shrouded in a green aura, he says it's time to begin and prepares to use necromancy. A greenish energy begins to enter the goblin's body for the resurrection process. With a sinister smile, he commands the fallen body to answer his call using his new skill. At that moment, the goblin's hand rises from the ground, covered in a greenish aura. With that, the rest of the monster's body begins to rise from the ground, ready to obey. The transformation is complete, and the goblin now has sharp claws instead of its hands. The young man looks with satisfaction at his first creation, a zombie goblin shrouded in an aura. To his surprise, the system announces that the creation is of high quality with very elevated stats. The status window shows that it has now become a 1-star undead zombie. The young man smiles because he knows that with this new zombie, he has helped to explore the garden. Now with the help of his servant, he continues to explore the forest in search of more prey. Soon after, 3 more goblins emerge from the bushes, ready to attack our hero. From atop a small hill, he and his minion watch the group of monsters approaching. Seeing the perfect opportunity, the young man decides to do a combat test and sends his servant to attack. Without hesitation, the zombie charges at the group of goblins to obey the order. It arrives with full force and lands a powerful punch right in the face of one of the goblins. But the other 2 stab it in the back, but being a zombie, it doesn't care about the wounds. The goblins continue their desperate attacks, but they can't truly harm the zombie. Ryaga scoffs at the scared goblins because a zombie can't be defeated with attacks on vital points. Taking advantage of the monster's distraction, the young man appears behind one and grabs it by the neck. He asks if he's not on the monster's radar and uses life drain to siphon its energy. The body drops lifelessly and its companion is terrified by the sight. The last goblin is paralyzed with fear as it faces the zombie slowly approaching it. Then, with a savage bite, the undead finishes off the little monster without any mercy. The young man then wonders if his skill also works on bodies that have already been defeated. With a smile, he confirms that it works and his stats rise again, making him very happy. Seeing that he can get strong quickly, he decides to pick up the pace and remembers an old saying. This saying goes that after defeating the first enemy, half the goal has already been achieved. In other words, with the first body in hand, a necromancer's job becomes much easier. The young man then activates his magic and turns all the goblins into his new minions. With this, he creates a small army of zombies with stats of almost 98%. With a satisfied smile, our hero knows that things are about to get much more fun. He sends his new army to attack and realizes that being a necromancer is the best thing in the world. The undead advance and destroy all the goblins in their path without any difficulty. Even when attacked from behind, the zombies feel nothing and continue to fight normally. One of the living goblins is shocked to see that its weapon doesn't even leave a scratch on the undead. The small creature is completely terrified and frozen by the monster that feels no pain. The minion then lunges forward and ends the goblin's life with a bite to its neck. Krotos complains that its contractor should fight with a bit more dignity in battle. But the young man tells it to get used to it, because this is how necromancers always fight. After a while, he reaches the maximum limit of 20 undead that he can control at once. Looking at his ring, he now has an army of minions ready to obey his orders. With eyes glowing in the dark, our hero's new minions are ready for battle. Then the small army of zombies charges at anyone who dares to appear. They attack a new group of goblins, who are completely terrified by the horde of undead. Suddenly, a fire arrow is shot by a mysterious archer who was hiding. The attack hits one of the goblins square on, which screams in pain as it's struck by the flaming arrow. The protagonist then realizes there's someone else nearby and stops his servants immediately. With a serious expression, he tells whoever is hiding in the forest to come out and show themselves. In response to the young man's call, someone begins to walk out from their hiding spot in the bushes. The group of hunters he saw at the entrance appears and asks who our hero is. Krotos wants to know what's happening, but the young man seems to recognize that group of people. He then identifies them as the twin shadow hunters, leaving his constellation confused. With a dark look, he remembers that they were the ones who tried to end his life in the past. Yuta and Yuka Rendo were known as the famous fraternal twin hunters of that time. He remembers they gave him trouble, but Krotos thinks the two of them don't seem that strong. The young man explains that they are 1 star now, and that before there were only 2 of them, not 3. The entity suggests taking them out, but Ryaga refuses because they just accepted a job. Then the group's leader approaches and asks if our hero is the one controlling the zombie. The protagonist realizes that the Necromancer class isn't well known at this time yet. With his zombies behind him, the young man confirms that the creatures are his combat summons. With a focused look, he already begins to plan his next steps in this new timeline. Our hero thinks that he needs luggage carriers and that they only became hunters for the money. With that in mind, he approaches the group and proposes that they work together in the dungeon. The offer is that he defeats the monsters and the group collects the magic stones, with an 80-20 split. The trio remains silent as they analyze the proposal from the mysterious zombie hunter before them. The forest of the ancient garden remains quiet as the group decides what to do next. The other 2 members whisper to the leader, saying they can't trust a guy who summons the undead. While they discuss, our hero eats something calmly without worrying about their decision. He notices that their conversation is quite loud and can hear everything they're saying about him. But the leader, named Yuma, interrupts the discussion and shouts that they accept the deal offered by the young man. However, he makes a counteroffer, asking for a 50-50 split to be fairer for everyone. The protagonist refuses and offers a 70-30 as a final offer, and the group leader ends up agreeing. Worried, the other 2 ask if it's okay, but Yuma tells him not to chicken out now. He explains that if the young man wanted to attack them, they would all have been on the ground a long time ago. Besides, the guy came in without gear and has absurd confidence, so following him will earn more money. Sometime later, the forest of the ancient garden seems more dangerous and tiring than before. One of the group members is completely exhausted on the ground, begging for a short rest. The girl on the team is also at her limit and can barely sit up from exhaustion. Standing, Yuma looks at the huge pile of magic stones they've managed to gather so far. He knew the boy wasn't normal, but the result of the hunt was far beyond what he had imagined. Meanwhile, our hero remains calm amidst a sea of bodies, creating another zombie for his army. The young man points to more bodies and tells the group to go collect their magic stones. With a forced smile, Yuma asks if they shouldn't take a short break to rest. But our hero's army of zombies continues its relentless hunt without stopping for a second. The protagonist points to another body on the ground and tells the group to go get the stones. With a fake smile, he tells them not to rush and to do everything in their own time. Seeing that scene, the group realizes there's no way out and that this guy isn't really human. After a while, it seems they have finally cleared all the monsters from that area. With the job done, the young man decides to check his status to see his progress. His attributes have increased a lot and his sacred and spiritual powers are well balanced. Satisfied, he notes that his stats have risen significantly and he's now like a level 4 hunter. Now that his level has gone up, he looks at the forest and prepares for the next challenge. He then turns around and says it's time to go after the boss of that dungeon. Further ahead, a group of armored goblins guards the area with a shaman sitting on a throne. The area's boss notices our hero's arrival and calls him a foolish human for coming there. The young man and his group observe the goblin shaman, who acts like the king of the hill in that place. The girl warns him not to provoke the boss, but the young man doesn't seem to care. With a furious look, the shaman orders his servants to kneel and bring him to him. With that, a horde of goblins with armor and swords charges at the group. Then our hero commands his zombies to strip the flesh from the enemy's bones. The undead advance and begin to fight the goblins with a savage fury. One of the goblins charges and tries to cut the zombie with its sword, but the undead is unfazed. The zombie then retaliates with a savage bite on the goblin's arm, which screams in pain. With this, one of our hero's undead is defeated, and the system announces that his number has decreased. But the young man doesn't care, and with a serious look, he commands the goblin's body to answer his call. In response to the command, the monster's hand moves and begins to rise from the ground. The newly defeated goblin rises as a zombie, and the young man's servant limit returns to normal. Without wasting time, the new undead attacks its former comrades with uncontrolled fury. It easily breaks one of their arms, showing its strength and loyalty to its new master. The group of hunters is shocked to see the young man turn the bodies of enemies into servants. Seeing that his soldiers are losing, the shaman begins to chant a mysterious spell in his language. He slams his staff on the ground, and a totem of valor appears to inspire his goblins in battle. With glowing eyes, the monsters grow stronger and prepare to attack with full force. The boss boasts that his totem weakens enemies and strengthens all his allies. But one of our hero's zombies shatters the shaman's staff with a single bite. The boss turns around, startled, and can't believe what just happened to his totem. With a furious look, he shouts that a mere human managed to destroy his totem of power. Then suddenly, several skull staffs begin to emerge from the ground around the zombies. One of our hero's undead uses the staff to attack one of the goblins with full force. With a confident smile, the zombie and its companions are not going to let the enemies get away with it. The goblin shaman is paralyzed with fear as he watches the scene with his broken staff. With a confident smile, the young man asks the boss if he's frustrated with the situation. At that moment, one of the armored goblins holds its staff and prepares for the attack. The shaman activates his curse of madness, and a wave of red energy explodes everywhere. The group of hunters feels the effect of the magic and becomes dazed with a strong headache. With this, the strength and agility of all goblins increase by 50 points at once. Stronger, the monsters begin to attack the zombies with full force, and one is defeated instantly. The battle intensifies and the zombie army begins to be decimated by the enraged goblins. Little by little, the number of our hero's servants decreases drastically on the system screen. In a short time, only 8 of the 20 undead he had in his army remain. Seeing the carnage, the protagonist realizes that the shaman's staff is his ace in the hole. The boss boasts about his bone staff, which carries the grudges of all the fallen goblins. The young man then asks if the staff is made of bone and realizes something very important from this. With a wicked smile, he thinks that with this information, victory will be very easy. He then activates his bone control skill to turn the tables in his favor. The shaman is shocked to see his staff begin to tremble and move on its own in his hands. The staff's skull then flies into our hero's hand, who catches it with a swift movement. With that, the curse of madness is interrupted, and the protagonist is left holding the skull. The boss is in disbelief and asks what the young man did to steal the power of his staff. With the curse broken, the goblins return to normal and their attributes decrease significantly. With a wicked smile, he asks the boss why he doesn't use his precious curse again. The bone control skill allows a necromancer to imbue bones with magic and move them. The young man realizes that because of the grudges, the staff has a better reaction speed than normal bones. With a wicked smile, he tells the boss he can have his staff back and throws it at him. The staff returns to the shaman like a sharp spear and hits him head on with full force. The boss is completely shocked and can't believe he was hit by his own weapon. The attack hits him squarely, leaving him gravely wounded with his own weapon embedded in his chest. Unresponsive, the goblin boss falls to the ground lifeless, with the staff's skull still in his body. With the boss defeated, our hero uses his life drain to absorb the monster's power. He notes that the goblin's power is quite large, as he was the boss of that dungeon. Suddenly, he turns and looks back as if he realized something he had completely forgotten. The group of hunters stares at the young man with an expression of both amazement and confusion. The protagonist kneels and begins to collect the goblin chief's blood in a small bottle. He realizes he almost used all of the monster's blood and nearly forgot to collect it. Then he stands up and tells the group he'll leave the cleanup to them and departs. The trio is stunned by the number of bodies scattered on the forest floor of the garden. Back in the city, the scene shows tall, modern buildings under a bright, shining sun. Our hero walks calmly down the street after leaving the portal and completing his mission. With a confident look, he exits the dungeon as if nothing had happened inside. Behind him, the group of hunters carries a huge amount of magic stones with great effort. In the crowd, people wonder how they managed to get so many stones with just 4 people. Yuma congratulates our hero and asks if they should leave the stones at a shop. But the young man says that to sell them at a fair price, it's better for them to carry the stones themselves. With a serious expression, he says he can't trust a group he just met today. The trio is shocked, and Yuma says they worked too hard to be treated like this. Our hero asks how much they think they'll get, and Yuma estimates around 6 million. He then picks up the shaman's staff and says that item will probably be very cheap. The protagonist asks why, and the leader explains the restrictions in the item's poor stats. The Staff of Grudges is a rare item, but it can only be used by priests, and its attributes are bad. With a confident smile, the young man knows that since he has both classes, he can use the item. He then says he'll keep the staff, and Yuma is surprised and asks if he's serious. The protagonist confirms and tells the group to deduct the item's value when they settle the accounts. But Yuma says that since they could never have gotten the item alone, there's no need to deduct anything. The rest of the group agrees to follow their senpai's lead and accepts his decision. With a satisfied smile, the young man thinks what he likes most about that united team. He then says goodbye and invites the group to dive into the dungeon together again tomorrow. The next day, the system confirms our hero's entry into the ancient garden once more. Beside his goblin minion, he observes the forest with a serious and focused look. With a serious expression, he seems to be planning something big for his second expedition. But Yuma appears completely exhausted and says he doesn't think he can continue today. The rest of the group is also on the ground, drained, surrounded by bodies and magic stones. He also says their bags are already full, so the group agrees to head back first. Alone with his army and his constellation, our hero continues his journey through the forest. Kronos asks why he sent the group back, and the young man asks if it was that obvious. He then explains that he doesn't want anyone seeing what's going to happen from now on in the dungeon. With that, he reaches the north side of the ancient garden, where the forest seems darker and more humid. The dense vegetation and the river that runs there create a perfect environment for other types of monsters. Hiding in the bushes, the red eyes of new creatures begin to glow in the dark. Suddenly, a group of frogmen with spears jumps out of the bushes to attack our hero. Without wasting time, he sends his zombies to attack the new creatures that appear to fight. With a savage attack, one of the zombies bites the head of one of the frogmen with force. But the creature retaliates and pierces the zombie's head with its spear, defeating it instantly. Another frogman attacks one of the undead from behind and hits it with a fatal blow. With this, the number of our hero's servants begins to decrease again on the system screen. The battle continues, and the frogmen prove to be much stronger adversaries than the goblins. The protagonist realizes that the new enemies have higher stats, which is why they are tougher. He then uses his potion control skill and launches his staff like a missile. The attack hits one of the frogmen right in the chest with great force. But the creature has the ability to reduce piercing damage and survives the attack. With a vein popping on his forehead, our hero gets very irritated with the monster's resistance. So he charges forward and lands a powerful kick right in the middle of the creature to finish it off. The system announces that the staff's piercing damage has increased with the infusion of spiritual power. With a well-aimed kick, our hero finishes off the monster and shows he's not messing around. He then uses his bone control to launch spears made of bone at several frogmen. But using both skills at the same time consumes a lot of spiritual power and leaves him tired. In addition, creating new undead also uses a lot of energy, and the system warns him of this. Despite the fatigue, he stands firm and tells himself he can still handle it. Then, with a single command, he raises all the fallen frogmen as his new servants. One of the newly created undead attacks one of the enemies with a direct hit to the head. The minion drags itself on the ground to continue the battle even with its legs injured by the enemy. With this, he levels up to 6 and the system congratulates him on his achievement in the dungeon. Satisfied, he thinks that at this rate, he'll return to his former state in no time. With a vengeful look, he sends a message to the Sorcerer King and promises to get his revenge. After clearing the area, he arrives at a place with ancient ruins and a mysterious cube in the center. With his army of zombies, he approaches the location and prepares for the next step. He then takes out a frogman heart he had saved and looks at the item carefully. Kronos asks what he plans to do, and the young man tells the entity to be quiet so he can concentrate. The protagonist explains that if he drips the shaman's blood on the heart, something special will happen. A green energy begins to emanate from the heart, which now pulses with a new and strange life. Satisfied with the result, he holds the item, which now glows with an intense green light. With a wicked smile, he reveals that he can now access a secret area of the ancient garden. With this, the system congratulates him for discovering the secret and moves him to the proving grounds. He then finds himself in a giant battle arena, and the system confirms his entry into the location. The arena floor is made of packed earth and the stands seem very old and worn. The young man explains that before regressing, he found the place but couldn't enter at the time. Suddenly, a barrier of light appears and prevents him from leaving the arena with his zombie army. A giant monster's paw steps onto the ground, and a new creature prepares to appear in the arena. The young man is a bit surprised by the barrier, and the system announces that the test is for one person. The test's objective is to prove his courage and potential in the ancient proving grounds for the constellations. With a confident smile, our hero prepares for what's to come in the battle arena. Then a giant dragonian appears, and the system announces that he has 10 minutes to survive. These proving grounds were created by the dragon army for constellations to choose hunters. In the giant battle arena, constellations could observe the hunters and choose the strongest ones. And in these tests, elite soldiers from the dragon army were placed to test the participants. Kronos mocks the young man, saying that with his current strength, he won't last even 10 seconds in there. Annoyed, our hero sees his constellation already looking for a new saint and tells it to shut up. He knows the monster has been weakened to a 1-star level, but it will still be difficult. The giant creature charges forward, and the arena floor trembles with the force of its steps. But the protagonist asks the monster to wait a moment, because he needs to make some modifications. The dragonian is confused and stops its attack, while the young man starts working on his zombies. With a smile, he asks if the villain doesn't usually wait for the hero to transform without attacking. The frogmen's bodies become covered in bubbles, and seem to be suffering from the transformation. The system announces that they have been successfully modified, and are now poisonous plague zombies. Kronos is surprised, and the young man explains that he was a 9-star necromancer before. Now ready for battle, he tells the dragonian to bring it on and shows he's not afraid. With a furious look, the giant monster prepares to attack with all its might. It lunges forward with incredible speed and prepares to deliver a powerful blow to our hero. But the plague zombies jump into the air and stop it from getting close to their master. Several of them jump on the monster to try to stop it with the strength of their modified bodies. They cling to the dragonian tightly and try to immobilize it for the young man's next attack. The monster's skin begins to melt from the zombies' poison as they sacrifice themselves in battle. The giant tries to shake off the minions, but they continue to cling to its body relentlessly. With a powerful punch, it explodes the head of one of the zombies, splashing poison everywhere. The creature begins to feel the effects of the level 12 poison that slowly corrodes its body. The young man explains that he converted the frogman's strength into poison for this difficult battle. Angrily, the dragonian punches the ground hard and goes after the zombies with everything it has. It uses its claws to break the arena's rocks and show all its fury and power. With a deafening roar, the monster charges at the remaining zombies in the arena. The protagonist praises the monster's resistance to the poison and prepares for the next move. He then injects spiritual power into his staff and temporarily increases his defensive power. With this, a green energy barrier appears around him to protect him from the monster's attack. He thinks the monster's strength should be at half, but it's still very strong. The dragonian shatters the barrier with a single blow and sends our hero flying with the impact. With a roar of fury, the monster charges at the young man, its eyes glowing with rage. But the protagonist uses his bone control to launch his staff with all his might. The attack hits the dragonian's chest dead on, and it feels the full force of the blow. The giant creature lets out a scream of pain and agony as the staff remains embedded in its body. With the monster distracted, he orders his zombies to attack all at once without stopping. The undead jump on the dragonian and begin to attack its body with bites and scratches. Even surrounded, the giant creature continues to fight with all its might to get rid of the young man's minions. The zombies cling to the monster's body to immobilize it and give their master a chance. With a direct punch, the dragonian explodes the head of one of the zombies holding it. With fury, continues to fight against the undead that surround it from all sides. Our hero praises the monster's last stand but says that this is the end of the line for it. Exhausted and wounded, the dragonian falls to its knees on the arena floor with no strength to continue. The young man then takes back his staff and prepares to deliver the final blow to the creature. With a swift movement, he approaches the fallen monster to end the battle once and for all. The protagonist prepares to use his life drain ability to absorb the monster's power. He then begins to siphon all the dragonian's energy, which screams in pain during the process. With that, the creature's body falls to the ground, and the system announces that he has successfully completed the test. Now he has passed the first ancient proving ground and can move forward. Kronos praises the young man, and he says he had already warned that he wouldn't be defeated so easily. As a reward, the system grants him the mark of resistance, which makes him stronger and more resilient. But he knows the real reward is the dragonian's body, which is a high-quality material. With a green aura in his hand, he plans to create an undead that surpasses the original body. For this, he needs alchemy tools and remembers a certain famous alchemist from that time. With a new objective in mind, he goes to the Saitama City Hall in search of a workshop. Arriving there, he finds a large warehouse that seems to be exactly what he was looking for. With a smile, he notices that the place hasn't changed at all since before his regression in time. Suddenly, an explosion occurs, and the warehouse gate is destroyed right in front of him. He thinks that not even this kind of thing has changed and coughs from the smoke rising from the explosion. Inside, a man in a white lab coat coughs from the smoke and seems to have been slightly injured. With a confident smile, the young man knows he has found the person he was looking for. He finally finds the great alchemist Renya Shintani, the creator of the mid-grade potion. That man is the genius who established the formula for the first mass production of potions. Our hero approaches and asks if he can have a moment of the famous alchemist's attention. He introduces himself as Ryuga and says he came there to borrow the alchemy tools. Renya is visibly annoyed by the sudden request, and the young man tells him not to be so uptight. He says it won't be a fair trade if he just borrows the tools without giving anything in return. The protagonist then reveals that he knows Renya is researching the healing potion formula. Shocked by the revelation, the alchemist asks how he knows that, and our hero offers to help. Inside the lab, Renya is surprised by the potion our hero prepared in front of him. He wonders how the young man managed to stabilize a potion that was about to explode at any moment. With a red face, he stares at the test tube and can hardly believe what he's seeing. The protagonist explains that Renya would only discover the formula in a few years, which is why he didn't know. With a smile, he asks the alchemist if he wants to test the new potion he just made. Without a second thought, the young man grabs a scalpel and makes a small cut on his own arm. He then picks up a small bottle and drips a few drops of a strange liquid onto the wound. Next, a white foam covers the cut and begins to take effect on our hero's skin. With the potion in hand, he shows his arm completely healed and without any mark of the cut. Renya's eyes sparkle and a huge smile appears on his face as he sees the potion working. Excited, he praises the young man and asks if he really managed to create the formula successfully. The alchemist approaches, all excited to take the potion and see the result up close. But our hero raises his arm and stops him from taking the test tube with the formula. He asks if Renya is curious about the formula, and the alchemist confirms with great excitement. With a wicked smile, the protagonist asks if the other would mind lending him a hand. With the proposal on the table, the young man decides to change the terms and invites the alchemist to work with him. In return, he offers to teach potion recipes and other things with a 6-to-4 split. Renya is suspicious and asks if he gets the 4%, and the young man confirms. With a smile, he thinks that the alchemist has already fallen into his trap and there's no escape. With a wicked smile, he says that from now on, Renya is his new business partner. In the lab, Renya is startled by the giant dragonian body right in front of him. He asks what that is, and our hero explains that he's processing the body for a ritual. The protagonist reveals himself as a necromancer, and the alchemist is even more shocked by the revelation. The young man invites the other to help, but Renya refuses because they don't have a contract yet. He says he's just letting the young man use the space while he thinks about the partnership proposal. With a smile, our hero understands and runs after the alchemist to continue the conversation. He knows that Renya is suspicious and that he needs to prove his worth to gain his trust. It turns out the alchemist was betrayed by his boss, which is why he no longer trusts people. Krotos complains about the betrayal of men, but the young man says the gods are all the same in the end. The protagonist asks if Renya is hesitant to sign because he hasn't seen his capabilities yet. The alchemist then challenges him to show his skills, and the young man accepts without a second thought. Renai observes our hero with a serious and analytical gaze to see what he's capable of. With a confident smile, he hands a tool to the young man, and the test finally begins. The protagonist then gives instructions for Renya to melt 5 mana stones in a specific ratio. The alchemist finishes the process quickly and hands the result to our hero in a tube. With a wicked smile, he prepares to show his necromancer skills to the other. Using the liquid as a catalyst, he begins to pour the substance over the dragonian's body. He then starts to engrave formulas and curses on the creature's bones with his dark magic. The two work together on the creation process of the new undead with great concentration. They repeat the process several times to ensure the final result is perfect and strong. Renya continues the process over and over until he finally achieves the desired result. After a while, our hero announces that the process is finally finished and ready. He says it finished faster than he expected, but Renya yells that it's been 3 days. Shocked, the alchemist wonders who this guy is that made him work non-stop for so long. He thinks that even as a 1-star, the young man managed to move the dragonian's heart with mana. Renya realizes that despite defying common sense, our hero's abilities are real. The protagonist turns around and offers the same split as before, leaving the alchemist surprised. Renya then accepts the initial proposal and decides to join the young man on his journey as a partner. He asks if our hero is sure, and the young man says yes and invites him to the team. The alchemist explains that with his help, his research will advance much faster than before. With a satisfied smile, the protagonist knows he has gained a powerful ally for his plans. He then says he looks forward to working with his new exclusive alchemist. Now with the dragonian's body ready, he just needs to find a soul to serve as its core. He then takes out his phone and calls Yuma to offer a new job to the group of hunters. The young man talks about the money he transferred and invites him on a very interesting new mission. In a dark and dangerous forest, our hero prepares to find what he's looking for. Suddenly, the group of hunters appears in a battle stance and asks if they were called. The protagonist tells him to stop with the pose and follow him to the next part of the mission. The group walks through the forest, and Yuma asks why they came to such a dangerous place. The young man explains that he came to pay his respects to an old acquaintance after so long. He searches for something in the bushes and wonders if the place he's looking for is around there. Hidden in the tall grass, the group carefully observes the forest, looking for any sign. The forest floor begins to tremble, and something large and heavy slowly approaches the group. Suddenly, a giant orc with a spear appears in front of them and prepares to attack. The group is terrified and warns our hero that a 2-star orc is coming. He then decides to test the performance of the processed bone he got from the previous dungeon. With his bone control skill, he launches the bone like a sharp and fast blade. The orc faces the attack with its red eyes and prepares to retaliate with its spear. With a swift movement, it throws its spear with all its might at our hero. The weapon flies with incredible speed toward the young man, who watches everything calmly. With a smile, he notices that the orc prioritized attacking instead of defending against the bone. But he says it's a shame for the monster because now it's too late to regret it. The bone blade changes direction in mid-air and deflects the orc's spear with a direct hit. The attack then continues and hits the orc's shoulder, which screams in pain from the strong impact. The protagonist praises the monster's resistance and says he was aiming for the heart but missed. Furious, the orc rips the bone blade from its shoulder with its bare hands without hesitation. It then throws the weapon on the ground and prepares to continue the battle despite the injury. With a war cry, it charges at the young man, and the system announces that the combat continues. But our hero is unfazed and faces the monster running towards him with fury. Suddenly, an explosion occurs, and the orc is thrown far away by the force of the impact. It turns out Yuma used his shield to create a smoke bomb and distract the monster. With the distraction, our hero prepares to use his Necromancer skills again. He asks how about 3 bones instead of 1 and uses his control to create more blades. The orc is surrounded by the blades and has nowhere to run from our hero's attack. The 3 blades hit it squarely, and the monster is defeated by the young man's triple attack. The orc's body falls to the ground, and the protagonist and Yuma observe the result of the battle. The group's leader is shocked to see that they managed to defeat a 2-star orcs. The young man then tells them not to stand around and to follow him, as the real work begins now. Yuma asks if they are on the right path, and our hero confirms with a serious look. The defeated orc's arm begins to move and regenerate with the Necromancer's magic. He then raises the orc as a new zombie and says the person he's looking for is in the village. With his new 2-star minion, he approaches a large, well-protected orc village. With a wicked smile, he thinks that on top of everything, they can also make some extra money. The group is scared of the situation, but the young man seems very confident with his evil plan. The scene changes and the sun begins to set on the horizon, with birds flying across the sky. Several orc bodies are scattered on the forest floor after a long battle. With his new orc servant, our hero levels up to 13 and becomes even stronger. But the system warns that he has reached the status limit for his race and can no longer absorb. He thinks he already imagined it wouldn't be infinite, but it's still a bit disappointing. With the day coming to an end, he decides it's enough for today and prepares to rest a bit. While camping, the group eats around the campfire, and our hero watches from a distance. He asks if he's ready, and the boy says it's been 3 days of intense hunting. The protagonist says his stats have risen, and that tomorrow they will go to the orc settlement. He then asks the group to stand watch at night, and everyone agrees, excited about the mission. With his zombies, he enters his tent to rest, and the group says goodbye to him. Under the light of the full moon, the 2 undead orcs stand guard in front of the camp. Meanwhile, the rest of the group sleeps peacefully after a long and tiring day of work. On top of a rock, our hero watches the starry sky and seems to be deep in thought. He finally levels up, and with a dark aura around him, he feels stronger. The system then accesses the Library of Knowledge and the files of the Ancient Master of Demise. With his ring, he opens an ancient book to see what he has unlocked with his new level. But the system prevents him from accessing the content and requires him to be level 45 or higher. He gets annoyed for only having access to beginner guides even though he was once a 9-star hunter. Despite being frustrated, he knows it's better than nothing and decides to read what's available for now. Sitting on the ground, he begins to read one of the books to learn what he can about his abilities. The book is written in a strange language, but he can read and understand everything perfectly. With his eyes glowing, he focuses on reading and absorbs all the knowledge from the ancient book. The system then announces that he has learned a new skill, and the sun begins to rise over the mountain. Suddenly, one of the group members wakes up startled and panting inside the camping tent. He looks to the side and seems to have seen or heard something strange during the night. It was one of his orc zombies staring at him with its glowing, scary eyes. He wakes up the group and says it's time to start the attack on the orc settlement. Yuma complains that they see the zombie every day but still get scared by its appearance. The young man says he made some improvements to his minions, and they are now stronger than before. With his new skill, he created 2-star armored zombies with strength and durability. He used bone armor to protect his zombies and flesh manipulation to strengthen them. Now with his army ready, he says it's time to go to the orc settlement. The sun sets on the horizon, and night begins to fall over the mountains and the dark forest. With his army of zombies and the group of hunters, our hero prepares for battle. They arrive at a large orc settlement with high walls and watchtowers all around. One of the lookouts rings the alarm bell and shouts that an enemy attack is approaching the gate. Several orcs with spears and armor gather at the gate to defend their village from the attack. The protagonist uses his bone control to prepare for the invasion of the settlement. He launches a barrage of sharp bones that easily shatter the wooden gate. The orcs are caught by surprise by the explosion, and the gate is completely destroyed by the attack. Our hero tells the enemies to stop making noise and catches one of their spears with his hand. With a quick movement, he throws the spear back and hits one of the orcs in the back. A giant orc with a red axe appears and seems to be one of the leaders of that place. Besides him, several archers position themselves on the walls and prepare their arrows to attack the group. A shower of arrows is fired at the invaders who prepare for the attack. Yuma uses his shield to protect the group from the shower of arrows coming from the walls. The girl on the team then readies her crossbow and prepares to retaliate against the archer's attack. With her fire arrow, she fires a powerful attack that hits several orcs at once. The attack is a success, and the monsters are defeated by the hunter's explosive arrow. Our hero praises the girl's skill and says they are just getting started with the battle. The group then charges at the orcs who are still standing in the settlement. The protagonist sends his army of zombies to attack, and the battle finally begins for real. One of the undead orcs fires a beam of blue energy from its eyes with its new ability. The attack hits one of the enemies dead on and blows it to pieces with the force of the beam. With a satisfied smile, he thinks it was worth studying the books the night before. The living orcs are terrified by the power of the zombies and don't know what to do in battle. But the young man says that was just the appetizer and that the real fight is about to begin. His zombies advance and continue to fight the orcs with their bone armor and strength. One of the undead blocks an orc's attack with its bone shield and prepares to retaliate. One of the enemies lands a powerful blow and damages the armor of one of the young man's zombies. The system announces that the armor has been damaged and the zombie's defense has decreased by 15%. Our hero then uses his bone armor ability to repair the minion's damage. The zombie's armor is repaired and its durability increases by 20% with the magic. He then uses flesh manipulation to further strengthen his servants in battle. One of the orcs is frightened to see the zombie's flesh regenerating and becoming stronger. The zombie's flesh latches onto the orcs and immobilizes them so that the other servants can attack. Yuma is impressed to see that the young man is using the zombie's flesh to trap the enemies. He realizes that our hero is not only powerful but also has great skill management. In the midst of the battle, a giant, muscular orc stumps the ground hard and draws attention. This is the berserker orc who leads the settlement's army with its strength and fury. With red eyes, it prepares for battle and seems to be a very dangerous opponent. Its body begins to glow with a red aura, and it prepares to use a special ability. The system announces that it has activated berserk mode and is evolving into a special specimen. With a confident smile, the young man says that the boss finally took long enough to appear. With a war cry, the giant orc swings its axe with incredible force and speed. The area effect attack is powerful enough to easily wipe out several zombies at once. But the protagonist uses his bone control and launches a shower of sharp and fast blades. The blades fly towards the orc and prepare to hit it with full force and without mercy. The attack hits the monster dead on and leaves it severely wounded with several cuts across its body. The blades stick into the ground, and the orc is left stunned by the power of our hero's attack. It tries to pull the blades from its body, but they are stuck and cause the monster great pain. The young man says there's no point in trying to remove them, and the system announces that spiritual power is being consumed. With a green aura, the protagonist tells the orc that it won't be the only one to fall there. The bone blades begin to spread across the monster's body, consuming it slowly. With this, he can control the orc's body, and the system warns of the consumption of spiritual power. He knows that if one of the bones comes out, the orc will move, and his only chance is to pierce its heart. With his spiritual power at 68%, he uses his bone control once more. A large bone stake pierces the orc's chest, hitting it right in the heart. With the fatal blow, the giant monster falls to the ground, and the protagonist manages to win the battle. Tired and out of breath, he stands silent for a moment to catch his breath from the fight. He then uses his life drain to absorb the orc's energy and recover his power. With the ability activated, he instantly recovers 74% of his spiritual power. With a wicked smile, he feels reinvigorated and ready for the next part of his plan. Yuma sees the other orcs fleeing and starts shouting for them to run and escape that place. The monsters run desperately towards the village gate to escape the Necromancer and his minions. But our hero isn't going to let them escape and uses his flesh manipulation ability. With this, the orcs' legs get tangled together and they fall to the ground, unable to flee. The monsters trip and fall over each other, forming a pile of bodies at the gate. They are trapped on the ground and can't get up to continue their escape from the settlement. Then our hero's orc zombie stands up and prepares to finish off the fallen enemies. With its axe in hand, it attacks the village chief and defeats him with a single, powerful blow. The group of hunters is shocked by the amount of magic stones they managed to get. But the young man picks up the chief axe and says that this is the real prize of the battle. The weapon is the rare blood axe, which amplifies the power of its user. With a satisfied smile, he says it was worth conquering the orc village for that item. He asks Yuma to take care of recovering the loot while he goes somewhere else. The young man thanks the group for their help and says goodbye as they clean up the area. He walks across the packed earth of the settlement in search of something very specific. Then he finds a giant ancient tree and tells himself that he has finally found it. With a serious look, he asks whoever is inside to come out so they can talk. The giant tree doesn't respond, and the young man remains silent for a moment, waiting for a reaction. With a sigh, he gets tired of waiting and prepares to take more drastic action. With fire in his eyes, he prepares to attack the tree with the bone he got from the dungeon. With a quick movement, he prepares to strike the tree with all his might. A green aura surrounds his body and he prepares for a powerful and destructive attack. But suddenly, a black aura emerges from the tree and stops him from completing his attack instantly. A dark figure with glowing red eyes emerges from the tree and asks who the young man is. With a confident smile, our hero says he's happy to finally meet that person. He then reveals that the figure is Sora Kashiwagi, the famous magic fighter from the past. The entity asks how he knows his name, and our hero faces him with a serious look. The young man explains that Sora is the hero who stopped the monster wave 35 years ago. He also reveals that in his past life, he turned Sora into an undead to fight by his side. Sora became a legend and even got a cenotaph so that people wouldn't forget him. Sora gained fame with his unique magic fighter ability, possessing the talents of 2 classes. The entity says his passing was not in vain, and our hero agrees with a serious look. The dark entity asks what he means by that, and our hero explains the reason. He asks if Sora remembers the sub-master of the Arasiri guild named Naruhodo Bakugo. An entire forest catches fire, and a great battle against giant monsters begins. Amidst the chaos, a desperate man calls for reinforcements on the radio with a panicked voice. He warns that there are still civilians trapped in the southern agricultural district, surrounded by monsters. The man screams Bakugo's name on the radio and asks for help to save the trapped people. But the monsters advance, and the group of hunters tries to protect the civilians with their shields. On the other end of the line, the radio announces that reinforcements are not available and they can't help. Sora realizes they were used as bait from the beginning and that it was all a plan. He understands that while they fought in the south, the rest of the guild escaped through the north gate. Bakugo confirms that thanks to them, the main force managed to reorganize and escape without problems. Sora questions him for sending them there knowing there were civilians, betting they wouldn't abandon them. But the sub-master tells him not to be pessimistic and that it's all part of a larger plan. He boasts that with this, the Arasiri guild will become the heroes who stop the monster wave. Amidst the desperation, one of the monsters attacks and one of the hunters is thrown away by the blow. The man falls to the ground injured, and the surrounding forest continues to burn with the fire of battle. Sora shouts for them to protect the civilians and escape that place before it's too late. With a powerful attack, he clears a path through the monsters so everyone can escape. Bakugo says that if you live, you're a hero, but if you're defeated, it's just the end of everything, and hangs up. The radio falls to the ground and shatters as Sora and his companions are left behind in the battle. The man shouts into the radio for everyone to flee as quickly as possible, as it's a direct order. Our hero reveals that Bakugo, the man who betrayed him, became a hero after his passing. With this, all records related to Sora were erased, and no one remembers him anymore. The protagonist says it's tragic that he can't even rest in peace after being betrayed. With a furious shout, the dark entity tells the young man to stop beating around the bush and get to the point. With a confident smile, he offers to help Sora so he can have his revenge. The entity stares at our hero with its red eyes and seems to consider the proposal. The young man then suggests that Sora form a contract with him and become an undead to fight. With his ring glowing in a green aura, he prepares to begin the creation process. He reveals that he has already prepared a vessel to house the soul of the former magic fighter. The dark entity remains silent for a moment and seems to analyze the young man's proposal. With its red eyes glowing, it says that in this state, it hadn't even considered revenge. But it imposes the condition that the young man can use it as he wishes, but without harming innocents. It refuses to participate in any act that could harm people who have nothing to do with it. Our hero remembers that Sora made the same condition before his regression in time. With a smile, he thinks that, as expected of a hero, his heart hasn't changed at all. He then accepts the condition and promises not to use his powers to harm innocents. With the deal sealed, the entity says that it will then become his new combat undead. With this, the system announces that he has acquired possession of the earthbound spirit named Sokyu Kashiwagi. He remembers that in his past life, he reincarnated Sora into a skeleton knight from the underworld. Kronos praises the creation and says that the new undead is a true masterpiece of necromancy. The new servant stats are very high, and it possesses Sora's magic fighter abilities. Excited, the young man points to the characteristics and says that this is something he didn't have before. The magic fighter trait allows him to use skills from both classes without penalties. He asks the new servant how it feels in its new undead dragon body. Sora says it's not as good as when he was alive, and the creation is still incomplete. The protagonist knows it's because of the curse formula he used to mimic the concept, but he thinks it's a better start than before, and that this is already more than enough. With his new servant ready, the young man tells them to go and start the next phase of the plan. But the Dragonian slaps its own head and calls him a minion with an angry expression. Our hero is confused, and the new servant shrinks in size and sulks with its arms crossed. He asks what's wrong, and the servant says it didn't like being called a minion. The protagonist suggests calling it by its real name, but Sora says he has discarded his old name. The young man finds the new servant troublesome and wonders if its personality changed with the transformation. The Dragonian asks for a name that intimidates the opponent, but our hero can't think of a good one. He suggests Fafnir, Tiamat, and Black Dragon, but the servant refuses them all for being clichés or over the top. Annoyed, the young man suggests Orochi, but the Dragonian refuses again, making him even angrier. The protagonist wonders if he should hit it, but the servant just grumbles with its arms crossed. But in the end, it accepts the first name and stretches to show it's ready for action. Tired of the argument, the young man agrees and turns to leave, calling the servant by its new name. But Fafnir yells for him to wait and complains that he's practically wearing nothing. He looks at the settlement and seems to be looking for something to cover himself and be more presentable. Then he picks up a piece of cloth from the ground and wraps it around himself to cover his lower parts. With a sigh of relief, he says he's a little better now and more comfortable to fight. Now dressed, he turns and tells the young man they can go and start the next mission. Our hero is confused and wonders if this was Sora's true personality all along. Back at the lab, Renya is startled to see something strange happening in his warehouse. With his eyes wide, he shouts that the body soaking in the solution is moving on its own. The protagonist says he obtained a suitable soul for the Dragonian's body at the border. Fafnir complains that the alchemist is scaring him and asks if he can punch him. The young man is called by his name and seems to be receiving a new mission or information. Yuma announces that they are going back to Tokyo to organize the items they collected in the dungeon. Alone, our hero prepares to use his necromancer skills on the orc's body. Renya and Fafnir watch as he wonders what to do with the body of the village chief. The Dragonian asks what he's going to do next, and the alchemist continues to watch curiously. With a wicked smile, he asks if the two are curious to know what he's going to do. Renya vehemently denies it but remembers that last time his arm almost fell off from working so much. He tries hard not to get involved but can't suppress his scientist's curiosity. The alchemist knows that the young man always exceeds his expectations, which is why he can't resist. The protagonist uses his flesh separation skill to begin the creation process. The orc's flesh begins to separate from the skeleton and prepares for a new transformation. Kronos asks if he's going to create another undead, and the young man says fighting power is never too much. The system announced that the skeleton's completion rate is high, and its stats increase by 100%. Renya then hands over the extract he prepared for the young man to use in his new macabre creation. With the stable quality of the extract, the skeleton specializes in defense and becomes more resilient. With a satisfied smile, he thinks he can use his new creation as a bodyguard. The skeleton's legs form, and it stands up from the ground ready to receive its orders. The new undead is a 2-star skeleton guard with a bone shield and sword. The young man tells the skeleton to protect him well when he uses his life drain ability. With a nod, the servant agrees, and our hero praises its good work. Renya asks why he created a skeleton, and the young man explains the advantages of this type of minion. Unlike zombies, he can provide spiritual power to the skeleton and control it as he wishes. The alchemist is impressed that he even thought about the maintenance of the undead he created. The protagonist then says he needs to leave and asks Renya to take care of the skeleton while he's away. The alchemist asks where he's going, and our hero turns to explain the reason for his departure. He reveals that since he leveled up, the Pantheon has contacted him to receive a sacred spell. Renya is silent for a moment, shocked by the revelation he just heard from the young man. He shouts and asks what that means, and our hero just looks at him with a calm expression. With the image of a praying skeleton, he asks if Renya didn't know he was a priest. The young man says that he is actually a very devout believer, and Kronos floats beside him proudly. The alchemist freaks out and says that's impossible, even if the world turns upside down. The protagonist ignores the outburst and asks if he has finished registering the patent for the potion. Renya confirms and says the review process should start soon, and our hero praises his speed. The alchemist says the only problem is advertising, as the exhibition only happens next year. The young man then offers to help and says he will promote the potions if he gets the chance. With a smile, Renya hands one of the potions to the protagonist and asks him to do it. With a wicked smile, he thinks that if this works out, they will make an absolute fortune. He laughs to himself and thinks that in the end, it's money that really makes the world go round. Renya wonders if the young man is really a priest with that evil aura and scary smile. The Pantheon is a tower that appeared suddenly after the great cataclysm that shook the world. It is there that hunters go to receive divine spells and blessings from their constellations. But our hero thinks the real greedy ones are the constellations that demand offerings. He doesn't feel any divine presence in the relics and wonders why they would leave them on the ground. He starts climbing the tower stairs and gets out of breath from the effort of the long climb. The young man complains about the lack of elevators and realizes he still has a long way to go. The tower has 108 steps, and he understands he needs to show devotion to the gods. Kronos finds the climb tough, and the protagonist wonders if he'll be struck by lightning if he complains. The entity asks how much is left, and he says that if they climb the same amount again, they'll be halfway. This means they are still far from the top, and the young man continues to climb the steps. He thinks that if he doesn't get anything out of all this effort, someone will have to pay for it. With determination, he continues to climb the tower stairs to reach his final destination. Finally, he arrives at a large hall with a ceiling that shows the constellations in the sky. Several constellations show their disgust and suspicion at our hero's presence there. Kronos laughs at the situation, and the young man tells him to be quiet for a second to concentrate. The entity then assumes its original form and says that now it's its turn to shine in the Pantheon. With its long hair flying, it turns to the sky and prepares to register itself. It touches one of the stars, and the system announces that the giant of the skies has been registered in the Pantheon. With this, our hero acquires the divine spells of Profane Blessing and Wedge of Retribution. Kronos boasts about the spells, and the young man says they are very good for his current level. The entity laughs at its own greatness and seems very proud of the power it has granted. But the system announces that the Giant of the Skies does not have the divinity of a constellation. In addition, to continue shining, it needs more achievements, and its light is too weak to attract followers. With a confident smile, our hero thinks that this doesn't change the fact that he has become stronger. He then leaves the Pantheon and walks alone through the city streets with a thoughtful look. He continues walking and seems to be looking for something or someone on that dark night. Suddenly, a voice calls him and asks why the heck he is leaving the Pantheon now. A muscular blonde man named Shigeru Sadik appears and faces him with a smile on his face. The protagonist asks who he is and doesn't seem to recognize the man who approached him on the street. Shigeru says he took care of him at the orphanage and asks if he remembers him now with that hint. Our hero remembers the trash who always extorted people and tells him not to talk like their friends. A memory from the orphanage shows Shigeru assaulting a younger boy and accusing him of something. He accuses the boy of snitching on him to the director and grabs him by the collar in anger. But our hero appears and punches the bully to defend the helpless boy. He asks if Shigeru's nose has healed since he broke it, and the other gets furious. The blonde man calms down and says he was losing his head for a moment and changes the subject. He then shows an emblem and asks if our hero recognizes that shining symbol. Shigeru reveals that he has joined the Emissary Guild and is now an official hunter of the organization. He threatens the young man and says things won't be like before and that he's no longer just any hunter. But the protagonist says that for him, nothing has changed and maintains the same calm expression. Annoyed, the blonde man growls and prepares to attack the young man in anger. He shouts for our hero not to be arrogant and raises his fist to throw a punch. With a quick movement, he tries to hit the young man, but his hand is stopped midway. The captain of the Guild's 7th Squad, Rago Joman, appears and stops the fight immediately. Shigeru tries to explain himself, but Rago doesn't seem to care about his companion's excuse. He then suggests they change locations and have an official match to resolve the fight. Rago thinks the young man is a cheeky kid for picking a fight with them even knowing who they are. He asks Shigeru if they know each other and suggests they let their fists do the talking. The blonde man laughs and says the young man just became a hunter and that the fight will be easy. With a serious expression, our hero accepts the challenge and says they can do it. Shigeru is surprised by the response and can't believe he accepted the fight. With a wicked smile, the protagonist asks if he's scared and taunts him to fight. Annoyed, the blonde man says he can't take back what he said and accepts the challenge angrily. They then go to the guild-affiliated gym to have their official fight. In the battle arena, the system announces the start of the match between the two hunters. Our hero reveals that he is a priest and that his proxy will fight in his place in the arena. Shigeru praises the young man's skill and items but doesn't seem to be afraid of the fight. But he says none of that will matter and prepares to show his true strength. With that, the system is activated, and the arena lights up with a magic symbol in the center of the floor. The system measures the hunter's defense and HP in the arena to ensure their safety. A barrier will be activated if there's a life-threatening danger, and the match finally begins. Shigeru taunts the young man and asks if he's so scared he's going to wet his pants. Our hero ignores the taunt and wonders what on earth that guy is talking about now. Fafnir says he never thought he'd run into the Emissary Guild in a place like that. He then prepares for the fight and says he'll see how well his new body holds up. The Dragonian knows he doesn't need to hold back against a member of that guild of traitors. But the protagonist asks him not to end the fight in a single blow because he wants to test something. Fafnir says holding back is harder for him but agrees to his master's request. Furious, Shigeru charges forward and shouts that he will show our hero his place. He attacks with his spear in a quick and precise movement, but Fafnir dodges with ease. The Dragonian blocks the spear with a kick and prepares to counter the enemy's attack. Shigeru uses the third form of his spear art and Fafnir is surprised by the speed. The blonde man continues his attack and tries to hit the monster with several quick and strong blows. He then uses his second form for a concentrated and piercing attack with his spear. Our hero notices that Shigeru's reaction time is better than in training. Fafnir asks if he really thinks such a slow attack will hit him and grabs him. The blonde man is shocked to see a spear has been stopped and can't believe what happened. He tries to move but his body is paralyzed, and he can't do anything else in the arena. With a wicked smile, the Dragonian taunts the young man for attacking without thinking about his next move. The Dragonian says that if this were a real battle, the blonde man would already be on the ground defeated. He then remembers he was supposed to hold back and feels a bit embarrassed by the situation. With a slap to the blonde man's head, the Dragonian throws him away with a single strong blow. The young man flies across the arena and hits the ground hard, feeling the pain of the blow. He spits a little and is shocked by the strength of the monster that hit him without mercy. The protagonist approaches and says that he cried when he broke his nose at the orphanage. With a smile, he says that now he only screamed for a second and that the bully has finally grown up. Furious, Shigeru gets up and yells at our hero for mocking him in the middle of the fight. The young man just watches him with his new servant by his side and seems very calm about the situation. The blonde man charges forward and tries to attack the Dragonian with his spear again, with more fury. But Fafnir dodges all the attacks, and the spear breaks the arena floor with the force of the blows. Shigeru continues his desperate attacks but can't hit the monster at all. The Dragonian says that if he uses the same move twice, the opponent will read him like a book. He then breaks the blonde man's spear with a single blow, leaving him completely disarmed. Shigeru's leg is broken with a strong kick, and he screams in pain from the severe injury. The young man is shocked and can't believe the pain he's feeling in his broken leg. Fafnir says the fight is over and prepares to deliver the final blow to the hunter on the ground. He raises his hand and prepares to end the fight once and for all with one blow. The blonde man cries in fear and realizes the fight is over and that he lost to our hero. But the protagonist yells for him to stop and prevents him from finishing off the opponent in the battle arena. Reigo is furious with the intervention and prepares to scold our hero. With a satisfied smile, the young man thinks they intervened faster than he expected. The system announces the end of the match and Shigeru is on the arena floor, defeated. Reigo approaches and says he'll call a priest to heal his companion's injuries. But our hero approaches and says he can heal the blonde man himself because he's a priest. The captain says that a one-star priest can't heal broken bones and glares at him. He asks how the young man plans to heal the injury, and our hero shows his ace up his sleeve. He then takes out one of his mid-grade potions and prepares to use it on the injured hunter. Shigeru is shocked and says a potion like that costs 1 million, and our hero agrees. The blonde man shouts that he doesn't need the winner's charity and tells him to leave the battle arena. The young man says he's offering help and that he should accept, but the other continues to refuse. With a wicked smile, he pours the potion on the blonde man's broken leg, and the healing begins. The potion takes effect, and the hunter's leg begins to glow with a red healing light. Shocked, Reigo sees his companion's leg heal completely, and even the bones mend. He becomes obsessed with the potion, and with a greedy look, he desires it more than anything. With a satisfied smile, the protagonist turns and prepares to leave the gym. But Reigo stops him and asks where he bought those mass-produced, mid-grade potions. Our hero thinks that the captain took the bait, and now his plan is going as expected. He asks if, as a captain, Reigo must be a 3-star hunter, and the other confirms. With a wicked smile, the young man challenges him to a match in exchange for the information about the potions. Reigo says that wasn't enough and accepts the challenge if the young man tells the truth in the end. The protagonist says the last match was too short, and that this time he wants to go all out. The new match begins in the arena, and our hero and his servant prepare for the fight. With a somersault, Reigo charges forward and prepares to attack Fafnir with his sword. He uses the 5th form of his sword art and hits the Dragonian with a sharp attack. Our hero thinks it was impressive that he reacted to the attack, but that it won't be enough. Reigo continues to attack the servant with several quick blows, and the system announces continuous damage. With its defense lowered, Fafnir sticks out its tongue and seems to be feeling the pain of the blows. The captain continues to attack relentlessly and breaks the arena floor with the force of his blows. The protagonist observes the fight and thinks that everything is going exactly as he imagined. He knows that Sora's fighting style is a terrible match for a Dragonian's physique. With a satisfied smile, he reveals that this was exactly why he used the potion as bait. Fafnir says he will use the fight to get used to his new slow and heavy body in battle. The young man praises his right-hand man's attitude and prepares to help in the fight as well. With a green aura in his hand, he says he can't just stand by and watch the fight. He then uses his profane blessing to strengthen his servant and turn the tables in his favor. The system shows that the unholy blessing strengthens Fafnir and weakens his foes. The young hunter is shocked to see how the sacred spell makes his minion so powerful. Then, a green energy flows from the protagonist toward his opponent in the arena. The captain feels his body grow heavier, and a shadowy figure appears behind him. At that moment, the system announces that his stats have dropped by 10% due to the magic. This makes Reigo wonder if the boy is really just a 1-star hunter. Kronos asks what he thinks of the power, and the young man says it's not bad for a weak constellation. Annoyed, the entity complains, but the young man grabs him and tells him to stay quiet during the fight. With a smile on his face, he gets ready to show his next card. The system explains that the Retribution Wedge stores up the damage taken by the target. He then looks at his minion and tells him to attack with everything he's got, without holding back. With a dark aura, Fafnir says that's the best order he could ever receive. The captain strikes with several blows, and the system announces that Retribution has been acquired. He boasts that for a 3-star hunter, adapting to the stat drop is an easy task. But he's shocked to see the minion enduring it all and pushing forward even as his defense drops. Fafnir realizes he needs to fight like one of the undead, and that the damage won't stop him. So he decides to withstand the attacks to force a close-quarters fight and grabs his opponent's arm. With a furious look, the Draconian prepares a powerful punch to counter the attack. The captain uses his combat art and lands a 10-hit combo on the undead minion. The force of the combo sends the protagonist's minion flying backward from the impact. Fafnir counters with a powerful punch, and the captain flies across the arena, crying out in pain. Lying on the ground, Reigo complains about the damage and says there's no way that's a 1-star summon. With a serious expression, he thinks that if he takes another hit like that, he's going to lose the fight. But furious, the hunter shouts that he won't lose to some worthless 1-star. He then gets up and charges forward, thinking he still has the advantage in speed. He knows that summoners are usually weak and rushes to close the distance to the young man. The captain manages to get past the minion and is now face to face with the protagonist. With his sword, he uses the 12th form for a precise and piercing attack. But the young man watches the attack coming toward him with a very calm expression. With a slight smile, he says he figured his opponent would try something like this. He then activates the retribution wedge with a simple gesture of his hand. A shockwave hits the captain head-on, sending him flying with the force of the blow. The system announces that the enemy's HP has reached 0, and the match is finally over. The scene changes, and we now see a huge modern building, which is the Arajiri Guild's headquarters. Inside a luxurious office, an important man seems to be receiving a report. This is Hakugo, the guild's number 2, who asks if they can mass-produce potions. With a bruised face, Rago confirms the information to his direct superior. The vice master then asks if he verified the effectiveness of the new items. The captain says they healed bone fractures instantly, and are just like the ones from the portals. With a guilty expression, he deeply apologizes to the guild's vice master. The vice master asks why the captain's defeat would tarnish the guild's reputation. The captain then explains that losing to an unknown one-star hunter is bad for their name. With a furious look, the vice master asks if their reputation is that fragile. Startled, Rago apologizes and says he got carried away by the Arajiri Guild's name. The vice master dismisses him, and with his head lowered, the captain leaves the room. He then orders the captain to be demoted and to find the source of the potions the young man used. Additionally, he watches the recording of the fight and seems to be thinking about something very important. He finds it impossible that a one-star hunter summon could defeat a 3-star. He then remembers the young man said he was a priest and thinks he might have a divine summon. With that, he tells his assistant to investigate the young man immediately to learn more. Meanwhile, the protagonist thinks that news of the potions will soon reach the top brass. Fafhrn then approaches and calls his master to talk about something that's bothering him. The Draconian holds a book and asks why he needs to read about spear handling. The young man explains that as a magic fighter, he's good in combat and wants to learn from him. The minion complains a little but seems to understand his master's reasoning. He thinks that if something goes wrong, enemies will target the weakest link to win. With that, he makes fun of his master's physique and tells him to get more protein to build some muscle. With his eyes glowing a bluish hue, the protagonist prepares something for his minion. Suddenly, the Draconian's hand starts moving on its own, and he's very surprised by it. He says he has understood the book and will teach his master, who praises his quick learning. Fafhrn tosses the book to his master and says he should memorize the content too. The young man catches the book in mid-air with a very serious look on his face. The system explains that the book teaches the basic Verdian-style spear art. With the book glowing, he thinks that if he learns this, he'll be able to use the Death Spiral. The Death Spiral was created by a spear saint and would take years to perfect. But with a wicked grin, he thinks that he'll master the technique in this lifetime, no problem. With that, he uses the skill book, and the system confirms the technique has been installed. He sees the 6 forms of the skill and is happy to have learned it all so quickly. Fafhrn brags about his teaching skills, and a spear hits the ground with force. The protagonist then watches his minion with a very focused and attentive gaze. The Draconian leaps and says that martial arts are learned with your own body, through practice. Then a large explosion goes off on the floor of the training arena. With his spear in hand, he announces that the practical training starts now. The minion attacks with force and praises his master for swiftly dodging the blow, but he warns that the young man will never get used to the spear if he only dodges attacks. Lying on the floor, the young man says his minion is asking too much of a beginner with a spear. He then asks if Fafnir is holding a grudge, and the other denies it, saying it's just tough love. The Draconian explains that this is real combat training and that enemies don't hold back. With that, he moves into attack again and tells them to continue the training. The protagonist gets ready with his spear and accepts the challenge with a confident look. He uses the 3rd form of the spear to defend himself with a rotational defense. With a shout, Fafnir attacks, and the young man successfully blocks the blow. With a smile, he gets ready to counterattack, thinking the training is going well. The young man moves forward and attacks his minion with a direct thrust to the chest with his spear. But the impact makes him cry out in pain and loses balance during the strike. With a hand on his chest, the protagonist seems to be in a lot of pain from the impact. Fafnir warns him not to let his guard down, because the battle isn't really over yet. The young man wonders why it hurts so much if he blocked the attack perfectly. His minion explains that he needs to defend against the second hit for the block to be complete. Annoyed, he argues with Fafnir, who reveals he adjusted his strength to his master's level. With a determined look, the young man says he's now going to fight with everything he's got. He then activates Life Drain to strengthen his body with the absorbed energy. With his body empowered, he uses the 4th form of the spear to attack with the shaft. The minion defends against the blow, and the arena shakes with the force of their weapons clashing. The young man thinks he managed to defend himself and that now is the time for his counterattack. But Fafnir attacks him by surprise with a blow that leaves him completely shocked. Lying on the ground, the protagonist is confused about what just happened in the training session. The Draconian explains that he failed to block the first strike properly, which is why he fell. With his minion's help, he gets up and realizes he's right and that he needs to improve. With his eyes glowing, Fafnir attacks him again and tells him to get it right this time. With a furious expression, the protagonist yells as he continues the intense training. The two charge at each other in a fierce and relentless exchange of blows. The scene then shifts to a bustling street at night, with many buildings and lights. In a restaurant, pieces of meat are being grilled on a hot, steaming plate. Yuma asks what happened to the young man's face, which looks pretty banged up. With his face all bruised and a bump on his head, the protagonist looks very tired. He says a lot of things happened, and the other seems to understand the situation. The young man thinks that fighting until the end without passing out was pretty impressive. Fafnir says that training his master is fun and that he might have gotten a little carried away. He then tells his master to let him know if he wants to give up, but he says he won't. The young man thinks he could improve his physical abilities, but it would be a waste. With a piece of meat on his chopsticks, he thinks he can't rely solely on enhancements. With a wicked smile, he knows he can become stronger than he was before the regression. Yuma is startled by his friend's expression and says he's starting to creep him out. The group leader thanks him for the 15 million deposit, saying the amount is incredible. The protagonist then asks if there's any recent news about hunters in general. Yuma explains that his team has been scouring the hunter internet to stay informed. He lists a few incidents, but the young man thinks none of them will make him strong quickly. With his bruised face, he laments that there aren't any minor incidents to take advantage of. Yuma then remembers the forgotten temple portal in Wakayama and mentions it to his friend. The protagonist is surprised and asks if the temple portal hasn't been cleared yet. Yuma explains that the Horizon Guild can't clear it and a breach is imminent. In static portals, you just have to eliminate the monsters that appear from time to time. As for fluid portals, a rupture occurs when the mana density reaches 100%. The group leader says that since the portal is in critical condition, the restrictions have been lifted. He also reveals that the Phoenix and Daybreak guilds are interested in the portal. The young man remembers that before his regression, the Phoenix Guild got an epic item there. With a confident smile, he thinks that the uncleared portal is a great opportunity. Yuma notices his friend's expression and thinks he's planning something again. The young man then asks the group leader to tell the others to meet up the next day. The scene changes to the Forgotten Temple, where two large dragons guard the portal. The system displays the portal's information, which is a fluid type and large in size. At the site, several hunters have set up camp and are preparing to enter the portal. One of the group members comments on the large number of hunters gathered there. Yuma asks if they should set up camp, but the protagonist dismisses the idea. The girl in the group is concerned since they only brought rations for a 5-day expedition. With a confident look, the young man says he'll finish everything in 5 days, no problem. One of the group members points at someone and gets his companion's attention. A hunter with black hair and armor walks through the camp with a serious look. The protagonist recognizes her and remembers that she found the method to clear the portal. He remembers she was a genius but lost everything in a tragic accident in the portal. Yuma then calls the group leader's attention to another person who has arrived. With a surprised expression, he points to Gouda from the Daybreak Guild, who is also there. The protagonist recognizes him as Gouda Gaishin, the future Iron Fist and a powerhouse in Japan. With a serious look, the young man realizes that all the future celebrities are gathered in one place. One of the group members gets worried and asks if they can clear the portal before the others. The protagonist tells them not to worry and that they'll do things their own way. With a confident smile, he thinks about the dragon scale armor and says he's going to claim it. He then starts walking toward the portal, and his group runs after him, telling him to wait. The system announces they have entered the Forgotten Temple, and the group looks at the ruins. With his ring glowing a greenish hue, the young man summons his powerful minion. Soon, Fafnir appears beside his master with his imposing draconic presence. The minion comments his master turned the spirits into undead to subdue them. The girl in the group says they were weak and asks if the leader plans to turn them too. With a dark look, he replies that he doesn't turn just anyone into an undead. He then insults them, saying they're weak and that becoming zombies would be their best hope. The protagonist then tells them to stop worrying about unimportant things. Suddenly, the ground starts to shake and the temple's enormous pillars move violently. One of the stone columns collapses from the shaking and nearly hits the group. Startled, everyone looks around and Fafnir asks if the change in terrain is a good thing. The girl in the group explains that the requirement is for 2 stars, but the difficulty is 3 star. That's because once a day, the dungeon structure and monsters change completely. The young man realizes the portal's characteristics are the same as before his regression. With that, he puts Fafnir in the vanguard and uses Unholy Blessing and Retribution Wedge. The minion says protecting his master is his duty, and the young man tells him to prove it's not just talk. With everything ready, the group starts to advance through the temple's ancient ruins. The Draconian stops suddenly and warns that there's something just ahead of them. A strange monster with a scary mask and horns emerges from the shadows. Yuma then recognizes the creature and says they are the dreaded fallen cultists. Without wasting a moment, the cultist charges forward with its claws ready to strike the group. But the Draconian minion steps in front and easily intercepts the creature's attack. Yuma warns that the cultists are strong enemies and offers to help in the fight. Ignoring the warning, the minion simply grabs the monster's neck with one hand. With his absurd strength, he lifts the creature into the air with no apparent difficulty. Next, he lands a powerful punch that completely demolishes the enemy. With his mouth wide open, Yuma is completely shocked by the scene he just witnessed. The minion turns around with a bored expression and says that was way too easy. The young man scolds him, telling him not to crush their heads so he can revive them. Further ahead, they find a defeated group of hunters and more cultists waiting. With his arms crossed, the Draconian comments that the enemies just keep coming. With his eyes glowing blue, he says he's joining the fight this time. The system shows the effects of the Staff of Grudges, reducing mana consumption by 12%. With that, he uses bone control, and spikes shoot out of the ground, hitting the cultists. The spikes pierce through several enemies at once with a swift and accurate blow. One of the monsters is pierced right through the chest by the protagonist's attack. He thinks that the cultists have low resistance and that dark and holy attributes are fatal. A dark aura surrounds the enemies, and the system announces their speed has been reduced. Fafnir notices their slowness, and the system announces his stats have increased by 100%. He thinks that thanks to his training with Rhaego, he's getting used to fighting on the front lines. With his increased strength, the Draconian attacks with full force, taking out several cultists at once. After the powerful attack, several bodies of fallen cultists are scattered across the floor. With a calm expression, the young man says he forgot to use life drain in the fight. The minion says he wouldn't have been able to use the skill without his help, and the master is surprised. With a smug look, Fafnir asks if he's not going to get a thank you for his help. Annoyed, the young man thinks to himself that he misses the quiet Kashiwagi from before his regression. The system then announces he has leveled up to level 20 and learned new things. He learns Dark Sage and Dark Dominion, which reduces the mana cost of undead. The young man thinks these are the perfect skills for the 5-day battle in the temple. With that, he uses his new powers on the fallen cultists and commands them to answer his call. They rise as armored zombies, and the system announces that their stats have increased by 100%. Yuma asks if the cultists will be stronger zombies, but the leader says the spells matter more. With a confused look, his companion doesn't understand what his friend meant by that. The young man explains that it means there isn't a big difference in their stats. With that, he tells them to pick up the pace because the temple is much deeper than it looks. The group then continues to advance through the temple's dark and ancient corridors. Fafnir remains in the vanguard, taking on all the cultists that appear in their path. Yuma also helps in the fight, using his shield to protect himself from enemy attacks. The girl in the group unleashes a powerful light attack against the hordes of monsters. The protagonist's zombie army also advances, relentlessly attacking the cultists. With an annoyed expression, the young man complains that the enemies just never end. Yuma warns that the structure is changing and they need to get to the room quickly. But the protagonist tells everyone to wait and seems to remember something very important. He then recalls an interview with Asaka, the first person to clear the Forgotten Temple. The interviewer asks if she can share her method for clearing the portal. The hunter explains that to reach the temple's boss, a special method is needed. She reveals that there are 3 types of monsters, and they drop 3 types of tokens. She then says that by collecting 49 tokens and placing them on a specific pillar, he recognizes the eye pattern and thinks he already knows what's going to happen next.